behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Welcome to the GTM podcast. Thank you, as always, for rocking with us. For the next 40 minutes, we'll make sure we pack it full of actionable real-world stories. Hopefully, you leave this with some things you can implement at your respective organizations that will help move the needle. Got a great guest. Excited for this one. I am joined by Drew Sechrist. Drew, my friend, welcome to the show.
Scott, great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Last time we saw each other, we had a little bit of better setting going on. We on a boat together, cruising in the bay. Life was good.
We were on a boat.
We were on a boat. Doesn't get better than that. Well, man, I'm excited for this conversation. There's so many different directions we can take it. But quickly for the listeners, I want to give a quick bio, and I'll get you to fill in some of the gaps. But Drew spent 10, almost 11 years at Salesforce.com. Ended up being a vice president of the highly technical vertical. Was that it?
High tech, yeah, the high tech vertical.
Yeah,
I'm not highly technical, but it was the high tech vertical.
But you could sell to them. You could sell to them anyway. Multi-time founder, so entrepreneurial. Was also a CRO at a company called Rocket Trip. And now is the co-founder and CEO at Connect the Dots, which I'm excited to dive into for a few reasons. But what else should people know about you, Drew?
Well, I'm in Belgrade, Serbia right now. It's a little odd.
Vacation, or that's where you're living right now?
I encourage you all to come to Belgrade on vacation because it's a great summer vacation. I wouldn't do it in the winter. But our company is headquartered in San Francisco, but most of our people are actually in Belgrade. So I split the difference. My home now is Miami Beach. About 2 years ago, I moved from San Francisco to Miami Beach, in part because it's kind of it's not halfway, but it's from a time zone perspective pretty good. 6 hours from Belgrade, so I can have my Belgrade calls, and then 3 hours from San Francisco, so I can have my San Francisco calls, and the flights are pretty decent. So yeah, those are my factoids. I live in Miami Beach and also in Belgrade, Serbia.
I like it. I want your life, man. So you got the winters in Miami Beach, and then you got the summers in Serbia.
Just
that's living.
Don't mix them up. Don't you get them backwards, and life's not good. But if you keep them straight like that, then life's great.
I love it. Well, I want to start just riffing on the idea behind Connect the Dots, and listeners will know why I'm leading you down this path, because it's something I built part of my career on, is this idea that there is always an entry point to anyone you want to talk to. We live in this hyper-connected world, especially if we're in tech. We all bounce around. We know a lot of people. And it's wild to me that we're still doing like true cold, when I've found if you get creative enough, there's always an entry point. And usually there's a nice, warm walk through the door if you do it the right way. So would love to hear kind of, I guess at the beginning, what made you go down this path of starting this company and this realization that you had?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd ask, how far back do you want to go? Because the story goes back pretty far. And maybe I'll kind of combine this with just fleshing in the background a little bit about who I am and how I got to be in this seat here in Belgrade. So I grew up on the East Coast, and ended up going to school in North Carolina. And then after college, worked for a couple of small companies. The last one that I worked for in North Carolina was a value-added reseller for Salesforce automation software and also business intelligence software. So, Scott, you might not remember these, but guys my age remember, like Goldmine, Sales Logics, if you remember any of those companies, and then Seagate Crystal Info, which later was acquired by Business Objects, which was later acquired by SAP. These are the packaged software applications that we were implementing back in the late 90s. And I one day I read this Wall Street Journal article about Mark Benioff, this guy named Mark Benioff, who was just a guy named Mark Benioff at that point. It wasn't Mark Benioff. He was leaving Oracle with $2 million from Larry Ellison to start this thing called Salesforce.com, and they were going to, from the ground up, rewrite Salesforce automation software to run on the internet instead of a web browser. And now that sounds like duh, right? That's what everybody does. Everybody writes software to run in a browser. But back then, that was kind of a mind-blowing idea. It was a great idea. I knew it was a great idea. And so here's the irony, and you'll appreciate this. I cold emailed Mark Benioff back in 1999, and I cold emailed him to resell their product. That was my objective. And because that's what we did. My company was a reseller and implementer of these technologies. And it was a little bit of an odd thought for me. I'm like, how are we going to resell this? Because part of our job is literally to like drive out to the client's office with a CD-ROM and install it on their computers. And like, we did a lot more than that, but that was definitely part of it. And I thought this is going to be a little bit weird reselling a product where I don't have a CD-ROM to bring with me. Weird. But we ended up never having that problem because Mark wrote me back almost immediately saying, thanks for the interest, but we're not going to have a reseller network. We're going to have a direct sales team. And I was kind of bummed out about that because I was really excited about this, like the prospect of what they were doing. And so I wrote back and I said, maybe we should talk about something else. I want to be involved in this in some way, shape, or form. And so Mark invited me out immediately to San Francisco. He said, come on, let's talk. And so I flew out to San Francisco and had a pretty brief conversation with Mark where he's like, he asked me about what I was doing and, with these mid-market companies in the Southeast implementing these state-of-the-art Salesforce automation tools and business intelligence tools at the time. And I explained all the problems that we were having with it. And I said, this is why I get what you're doing. There are all these problems with this delivery model, the client server delivery model. And this just nukes all those problems. They're gone. If you just deliver it in the browser, it's incredible. And so he knew that I had the vision, and he immediately made me a job offer that I could not refuse. Like literally, like quadrupled my income, like literally. Now I found out later that I had to go earn it. It was like your on target earnings, right? Now here's your quota, and you got to go sell it, or if you don't, you're gonna get fired. But I sold it and then some, and so it was all great. So I moved out to California in 1999. Late 1999, I started as employee number 36 at Salesforce. Okay, so you asked, like, where's this idea come from? The idea basically came from, I cold emailed Mark Benioff, and it worked out great. That's the irony of this whole thing. Like,
Good luck doing that now, anyone.
Yeah, hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's a whole different, like, the volume of cold email is now so high. And I would also say, actually, like, the craft of cold emailing has gone up too. There are all these clever things that people are doing to try and gain attention. But, if you're a decision maker, you see what that is. These cold email techniques are great, and it's nice if somebody says that, that point out a few things in your life that obviously they've done a little bit of research, or at least, their generative AI has done some research on you and said something that's kind of maybe going to catch your eye. But these are all still cold outreach techniques, and they're hard. We did them at Salesforce. I was there for a decade, from 99 till 2010, and if we had to, we did cold outreach. We do cold emails, cold calls, all that stuff. But what I learned over time at Salesforce was, and I think as you put it, there's always an entry point. There is, and it became this like challenge. Like, how do you find that entry point? And I got really good at it, and I ended up leveraging it to the point where I was the number one account executive globally. Later, I became a sales manager, and I was the number one sales manager globally. And frankly, a lot of that was, I would say, it wasn't like my skill. It was It wasn't like, wow, Drew's the best salesperson on the planet. It was like, I think Drew, like what I got really good at figuring out is where are the shortcuts that you can take? How do you make this not so hard? And one of the shortcuts that I had was, Mark Benioff was super well connected already, but when he started the company, it just kept getting better and better and better. So I would figure out how to tap into Mark's network. And, one of the things I did early on is I was originally selling into the Southeast in, at Salesforce because I had roots there. I went to University of North Carolina. I thought I'd leverage that a little bit, some goodwill. And but then later an opportunity came up to have a Bay Area territory, and I was like, I want to be closer to Mark's network because yeah, maybe I have a little bit of a network in the Southeast, but Mark's got a hell of a network here in the Silicon Valley. So then I started leveraging Mark's network and got pretty good at it, figuring out who he knew, and I proactively go to him and say, hey, anybody at these accounts, and invariably, he'd have somebody. And then it wasn't just Mark. We hired in a really great team. The whole team was great, and a lot of them were Bay Area people that worked for other Bay Area companies. And so I would just figure out how to, run down all of those relationships to get warm introductions to the companies that I was trying to sell to. And then the accelerator came after that, which was we started getting really successful customers. So we'd sell them Salesforce, and they'd be really thrilled because it was so easy to set up, and they got everybody organized, and now their forecast worked, and they had a clear view of all their accounts and all their relationships. And some of these people have got like promotions out of this and raises because what a great job. You selected Salesforce, you implemented it. Now we're all like organized way better than we've ever been before. Here's your raise, here's your promotion. And so those people now were like, friends. We had earned a good relationship with them. Built, like we delivered our part. And so all the time, I'd say, great. Who are three other companies that you have people at that you want to introduce me to so we can help deliver similar results to them? And so all these things where you're like, we figure out who did Mark know? Who did our executives know? Who do our customers know that we could tap into? Somewhere along the line, somebody came up with the phrase connect the dots to mean that thing. How do we connect the dots into the companies we want to sell to? There's some debate about this. I think it's a guy named Dave Rudnitsky. He was one of our legendary sales leaders based on the East Coast, and he came up with an acronym called Success, SUCCESS, and each of those letters meant something. And one of the C's was connect the dots. And he trained all of us on that. And from that moment forward, everybody at Salesforce and the sales organization and everybody in the Salesforce diaspora after that refers to this thing, this concept as connect the dots. And it's core. It's the ultimate cheat code. If you can connect the dots, then you're in at the right level. You're in at the decision maker level, and you come in with gravitas, with clout. You're anchored at power. You can go run a quick sales cycle. You're going to have a larger transaction. You're going to get a bigger share of what you're trying to sell. It's just everything works better that way. So it's finding that entry point. How do you do that? And so back when I started, there was no such thing as LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn started maybe around 2003, something like that. And it wasn't, it was a network effect company, so it didn't start out real big, and then gradually over time it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, before LinkedIn, this was kind of a dark art trying to figure out who knew who to navigate to get warm introductions. When LinkedIn came along, LinkedIn was definitely very helpful, and it got a little bit of, it got some initial traction in Silicon Valley, and that was pretty cool. So we could start using that to see who knew who, and that became a part of our playbook. And but it suffered from some early problems, like the network wasn't that big, not everybody was on there, so it was of limited utility. Fast forward to today, it's like the exact opposite problem. Now in 2023, everybody's on there, everybody's aggregated, followers and network, and they've click accept on those LinkedIn requests to everybody. And so the graph is now gargantuan, but it's polluted. There's a lot of noise in there, and you can't really tell who really knows who. Just because somebody's linked into you, I don't know. What's what like you tell me, Scott, what do you think the probability is that you know anybody who's on your LinkedIn graph?
Probably, I think I have like 42,000 followers, and I probably know like maybe 20%, maybe. And those would be like loose, like people that I could like. We know enough people that I know, like kind of know them, So maybe it's even less than that, but yeah, it's
Well, I mean, you're a something of an extreme scenario. You're an internet famous guy, and so that you got a lot of. I don't have that many. I've got like 5,000 LinkedIn connections, and they and I know probably 20% is about my guess if I go through that. Um, so the problem with LinkedIn in 2023 now, that graph is how do you find the real relationships that are leverageable? And there's never really been a solution. And that's actually what we set out to solve. We wanted to go solve that problem. Like, how do you actually see who really knows who? How do you cast a larger net? Like getting all the relationships out there in your life. Like you, Scott, how do you capture all the relationships that you have? And then how do you neatly categorize them and score them with strength so you can see how well you know them? And then how can you use that in collaboration with everybody that you work with, everybody at your company, and the people outside of your company that are your stakeholders, like your investors, advisors, your board members, your customers, your friends, your family. How do you use that to collaborate in a way that is way more effective, so you can see the entry point, the clear entry point where you can just walk through the door warm? And so that's the challenge that we set out to solve 4 years ago when we started this company, and that's kind of the origin of the whole name Connect the Dots.
yeah, it's cool, man. And thank you for sharing that. And listeners who have, I don't know, listened to this for a while now, will know why I'm excited and passionate about this topic, because in our own ways, we've been focused on like a similar problem, like how all my success as an individual contributor, starting way back when I was like a BDR to an AE to leading teams, was just exactly this. It was connecting the dots. And so much so that, I spent the last 2 years at Outreach building out a strategic engagement division, little tiger team where it was just all about finding the best entry points. And it was an incredibly powerful exercise. And we didn't use that much technology. It was pretty low tech. Google Sheets, top 100 accounts, you know, getting our VCs, our board of directors, our advisors, any influencers, any good partners, our top 35 executives who were connected, scraping all their LinkedIn connections, using VAs in the Philippines to map all those out, then going manually through and getting them to score them. So this is like a big exercise. You got to get like full company buy-in. Um, and then, you have to actually take action on those connections. But all of that, which sounds like a lot of work, was an incredibly impactful exercise. And it's how we closed some of our like biggest accounts. And it was always crazy to me that more people weren't doing things like that. We're all running so fast to our quarterly number, and no one's actually taking a holistic look at the strength and power of the dormant relationships that are sitting in like a 1,000-person company, God forbid, like a 10,000-person company. Like the exponential factor of that network is just absurd, So all it takes is a little bit of patience, creativity to unlock and, connect those dots. So I'm glad to hear that you're on this, because I feel like as networks get bigger, the understanding those networks will become like the next thing. I think with like these social platforms, the emphasis was growth, right? It was like grow your network, grow your network, grow your network. And now, you know, now we have these networks that we can't make sense of anymore. And so I think the next piece And the next evolution is going to be understanding and taking action on that, which has been missing for a long time. It's almost, someone said it the other day, go to market is going to be replaced with go to network, which I think is an interesting, cute way of emphasizing this point.
There's a lot that you just said there that resonated with me. One of the things is you said that it's, it requires patience and creativity to like solve that network problem. I would say what you did, what you described doing, wasn't just patience and creativity. I mean, it was a gargantuan effort. You had a lot of people involved, and you had high level. You like, I remember, you had mentioned this story to me offline before the call a little bit, and you had high level people like the chairman of AT&T, who had tasks, right? Like had to score relationships and was going to do this because it was going to help you. But I mean, that's a lot of work. And then you had EAs in the Philippines doing this, and you're like scraping data and figuring out how to sort it and make it actionable. So, I mean, that was a big project, and and a lot of calories burnt. But it sounds like the one thing that you told me before the call, when you mentioned this, was that there was something that instigated this. I think people would be interested maybe to hear that. Like, what happened? Why? Because why? What would cause you to go spend all these calories to go solve this problem?
So I've told this one before, maybe not on the podcast, but I wrote about it in the newsletter. It was a postmortem. So everyone does, postmortems, on big deals. We unfortunately lost this deal. And as we were going through it, one of our executives is just losing his mind. And he goes, how was I not brought into this deal? I'll leave out all the F-bombs that came with it. But it was like this champion. It wasn't the champion. It was actually the decision maker. So it wasn't the main contact, but like the person that was the signing authority was the best man in his wedding. And that was my light bulb moment of, oh my God, there is no person who sees it all. Who is the person that sees it all? There's no one, like our CEO doesn't know. He doesn't have a crystal ball. Like the VP, we have, 6 different VPs. They're super focused on their thing. The AE, like, yeah, maybe could have connected those dots, but he was probably multi-threaded. He had his like executive stakeholder already. He ticked that box. He did the thing. And there was no one looking at it. And so that's when I was like, okay, we need some people looking at all of our top strategic accounts and all of our relationships and just actively connecting those dots, whether it was starting a new opportunity, increasing deal velocity in existing ops, or on the like 5-yard line, making sure we don't fuck this up and that we're connected to power on all sides as much as we can. So yeah, that's what gave me the drive to set this all up, because it was a big program to stand up.
So when it did get up and running, did it work? How well did it work?
It worked like talking hundreds of millions in pipeline, hundreds
Oh,
of
wow.
millions in pipeline. Yeah. It was extremely effective. And then we started bundling in. It got pretty creative because then we figured out, we got to a certain point where, we did learn that some of the stronger relationships with power, right? Let's say the chairman of AT&T is friends with the CEO of TELUS, right? And we've been talking to TELUS for a while. It's not always appropriate to launch to use that connection to, immediately start a commercial discussion. So we started playing around with different working with marketing to do like executive roundtables and really tailored high-end dinners and things, so that the ask of the chairman of AT&T, we could make it a give for him. Like, hey, invite him to this super white glove, floor seats at this basketball game or whatever. And it's just to, catch up and talk about the future of go-to-market. Nothing to do with outreach, nothing to do with that stuff. And so we started like layering on these different programs. We used to have like a podcast play we would run where we would invite them on the podcast if they were like trying to build their brand. So we tried to make it over time so we wouldn't exhaust the people that had the relationships. We tried to give them gives that they would have, and we had about 7 different plays that they could run, and then it became even more powerful. Granted, those would take longer, but this we were looking 4 quarters out, which you have to in enterprise, selling anyway.
That's great. That's great. I've seen the power of like having these, events that you can drive really high end people to, and I think it sounds like you guys had absolute success pairing that with figuring out the relationship you can leverage to drive the right attendance. So it sounds great. Well, congratulations on that. What a great program. Does it survive you? Like you've obviously left Outreach. Are they still doing that or some version of it?
Honestly, I don't think so. And the reason is if I was going to build it again, so one of the important things we did and why it worked was it was super white glove, and there was a one single point of contact, right? It was like me talking to Ralph de la Vega and like our partner at Sequoia, and so they would not, if an AE had sent them it and they were getting it from 14 different AEs, they're going to just start ignoring those. But when I would do it and reach out, they knew I would come prepared. I had a bunch of context on the account. I'd spend 30 minutes with them, be like, here's all the people we're talking to. Here's the problem that we've identified, and really like act as their business partner. But I don't think it's still going, but I don't actually know. I should find out. But that is one thing, I guess. It's important to have that centralized point of contact who can act as that trusted liaison for them, but maybe spreading it out a little bit more might be the move.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting you say that because I think both of those things are important. Like you need to spread it out enough so that the person who cares about it can see that, hey, our CEO, has a strong relationship with this person who turns out to be, the guy who was best man at his wedding, and we should leverage that now because I know we have this deal for this quarter, and we haven't touched that person yet, and we should. So you need to have enough decentralization so that the person who cares the most, which is usually the account executive, it can see the information and then decide to act on it. But I think you raise a really fantastic other point, which is, like you're, the chairman of AT&T and your partner at Sequoia, they don't want to feel like an SDR working for your AE.
Totally. Yeah.
So if you've got like a Scott who's like, okay, Scott's the ultimate, high touch, white glove. He's gonna think everything through, and when it comes to me, Scott's already, vetted this, and it is a good request, and it's going to be a good use of my time. That's one thing. But if it's like, okay, now I'm getting peppered from 50 different AEs, all with different requests, then your chairman of AT&T is going to tune out, and so is your partner at Sequoia, and then the whole thing kind of collapses. So how do you manage that? By the way, this is I told you I was going to try to not be too self-serving about what we do over here at Connect the Dots. So
I think it's it's so perfect for the audience anyway. Like technology aside, this is just a conversation about, how to partner sell, relationship sell. Like this, I think this is all super, super valuable stuff. I'd keep you honest if you were dumping some features on us right now, but I think we're good.
You shut me down if I become a shill. But what we decided to do, the way we built the tool, Connect the Dots, is you have third degree visibility via the people in your network. So you could imagine that your account executives can see that Scott has a strong relationship with somebody. That somebody, let's say, is the chairman of AT&T, and that the chairman of AT&T, has a strong relationship with the CEO of the company that the AE is selling to. Now, the way that we have designed the product, the AE can't go directly to the chairman of AT&T. They have to go through you. And the way that we built the product is that the AE can now write a ghost email for you. So you, Scott, can scale. You can say it'll say, hi, whoever this person is that Scott knows. Turns out it's the chairman of AT&T. We're working on a deal with XYZ company. It looks like you've got a strong relationship with the CEO there. Are you comfortable making an introduction for our CEO to be introduced? Or whatever the text is. Your AE can actually write that for you, and then you look at it and you say, that looks great. Or you make a little tweak to it because you know how the chairman of AT&T likes to be communicated with. And then you click the send button, and that's it. It's off your plate. You have sent the email to the chairman of AT&T, and he can now tell you, yeah, I'm happy to do this. And by the way, then you can actually write a ghost email for him to send to the CEO of the target company. So you're saving him. He doesn't even have to do anything. He just has to read what you wrote and say, yeah, that looks good to me. I'm okay with it. Click send. And now you've saved him 2 minutes or 3 minutes of, or maybe even worse. Sometimes you have to really think about these things and write down what you want to send. You've saved all that effort for him. So we've thought about this in a lot of detail because we've been on every side of this. We've received tons of I and our board and our executive team have received tons of lousy cold emails, and we've received a few really good warm ones in our careers. And there's a whole different experience, and we know what both feel like. And we've also been asked to write ghost emails. We've been executives. I've been a junior guy at Salesforce writing the ghost emails for Mark Benioff to send to people. So we've looked at this from every angle, just making it as smooth, silky smooth as possible, so everybody feels really good about it. It's really fast and efficient, and you're finding all the best entry points so that you can walk in warm.
Yeah. No, I love that. And a few things there that I'll just highlight as well is like I used to genuinely play this like thought experiment with myself, and I think anyone who's running this play needs to understand that you don't become CEO of Outreach, chairman of AT&T. You don't become these people without intimately understanding how like the dollar value attached to these relationships. And they mean a lot to these people, and they've treated them like gold, sometimes cultivated them over 2 decades. And so if you're coming with a 3-line email and being like, hey, like intro me, please, you're like in a way asking them to debit $10,000 from their relationship bank with this person and kind of fly in blind. And so like take the time to do a really crisp ask. Make sure you're introducing power to more power. Don't ask for the direct introduction. That's goofy. And give them the context, give them more. These are business people. They're highly successful business people. Give them all of the context because likely they're going to rewrite your email to a certain extent anyway, if they're, type A, which many of them will be. But the thought experiment, you'd be like, you're asking this person to debit $10,000 of relationship capital with this other person. You need to build the business case for it and make it simple for them. And if you're not doing that, they're just gonna ignore you. And yeah, it's so my next question for you, I would love it if you could share a story from your time at Salesforce where you ran the connect the dots playbook, if you will, and it ended up being, super impactful.
Yes, and just to tie out on your last thought there, because it just really it made me go back in time and remember this. I remember when I would ask Mark Benioff to send emails, and Mark, by the way, like super happy to do it, right? But he was also super critical if you didn't do a good job of it. So I would, and you have to be short, right? Like Mark's not going to send a volume to somebody, so you'd have to distill it into like 3 sentences, 4 sentences that were really, really, really on point. And so those 3 or 4 sentences, sometimes that would take me like 3 days. I would be like, I'd write it, and then I'd be like, nope, that's not it. And then I'd go for a run, for 40 minutes and then come back and then change 3 words on it and like keep doing that over and over. And it took a long time, but you need to do that because like uh, it's going to be impactful when it hits if you get it right. And you also have to think about like how much political capital you've got with the person you're asking. So it's the chain of, you want them to look good. You want them to feel good about you. Uh, All of that needs to work. And so it's, getting those 3 or 4 sentences right is so hard.
I couldn't imagine asking Mark Benioff to send a cold email on my behalf. That's a crazy sentence just to utter, at least these days.
Yeah. I mean, he'd do it. He'd still do it, I'm
You do it?
sure.
If it's the
Yeah.
right
I
4
mean,
lines, he'll make it happen.
it's the right. It's all about like the leverage. It's like, does this make sense? Does this to Mark Benioff make sense? And so you get like being close to him, like physically in the same office, and just really kind of via osmosis, knowing what he cared about was also helpful too. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Okay, so the question is like when an example of a time when this really lined up and worked well. I've got one that definitely jumps to the front of my mind. There are a lot of these, but one was have you ever run into a guy named Jim Steele? He ran sales at Salesforce for some of the critical years pre-IPO through IPO.
I don't know if I've met him personally, but I've heard the name multiple times.
Yeah, he's a legend, and a great guy, and I learned a lot from him. And I was also I was part of his interview process at Salesforce back in, call it like, I'm gonna guess that was like 2003 or something, pre-IPO, but I can't remember. 2004 is maybe the IPO, something around there. So and I was at the time I was an account executive, and I was a highly successful one. And so Mark asked me to be part of his interview process, and so I sat down with Jim when he came in, and I spent about an hour with Jim, and it was clear like he was like very, very good, like very senior guy, came from IBM, super polished, really, really smooth, very engaging, and also like he really loved to sell, and he had all these great stories about his time at IBM when just like failure is not an option. Like we're gonna go to Japan and win this deal, and literally like we're not going home until we win this deal, so we just stay in Japan until the deal is won. So I was like, this is awesome. Working with this guy is going to be great. And so afterwards, Mark said, "What do you think? Should we hire him?" I'm like, absolutely, 2 thumbs up. Let's get him on board. And so not long after that, the deal was sealed, and Jim came on board, and Jim was like, "Drew, I want to thank you so much for giving me the 2 thumbs up for Mark, because I'm excited to be here. How can I ever repay you?" And I was like, "Oh, that's easy. Here's my territory. These are all my accounts. Who do you know in my territory that we can go sell to?" And he found a number of people, but there was one that kind of popped out right away. That was he was the president of worldwide operations at a big semiconductor company, and I was like, said, I know this guy really well. We work together at IBM, and we're friends and all this stuff, and it's great. And so he called him and said, "Hey, can we come down and pitch you Salesforce? I'm here now." And said, "Absolutely, Jim, of course, come on down." And so we walked right into the president's office, and then we pitched him. And I'm a pretty young account executive at that point. It's kind of intimidating. It's a big company, publicly traded company, and we aren't used to selling to companies quite this big yet, in general. And next thing you know, like a couple months flew by, and we did the sales cycle with sponsorship from the president. Came back, presented the business case, did the demo, all of it, and they signed the deal, and we got $1 million transaction out of that. Now $1 million transaction back then was gargantuan. Now $1 million transactions are not that big a deal at Salesforce anymore, but that was gargantuan. And so that wasn't my only big deal that year either. So I blew it out of the water, and and I would have I've said this before, that account without that relationship with Jim would have gotten $0 from that account that year. Zero. We would have never gotten into the right level to pitch it. Semiconductors were not strong for us. They had a very different like forecasting model. It wasn't like your standard, companies that sell software or just regular widgets. Like forecasting is really odd. Our forecasting module didn't really work well for it. But all those things we were able to surmount because Jim had this relationship, and we could get to the right person, and we got the audience to address all of those concerns, and there we go, $1 million transaction. So yeah, there you go, it works, and then the commission check clears, and you're like, I want more of this. How do I find more of this? And so fast forward, 15 years, you start a company to like help everybody try to get more of that, because there's a lot of that out there. We just we need to turn the stones over and find those relationships, and that's the challenge. If you don't know that they exist, you can't leverage them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the connectivity is just increasing, but the understanding of that connectivity is still loose. So it's exciting times. I feel like that is really the future of outbound. Will be building networks, understanding that network, and leveraging that network. It'll be like a 3-step process, and that will be outbound. And we might even have like SDRs that are focused on like building the network, maybe through content, maybe through community, and then there'll be more like business analysts who are like really understanding that network through technology, and then there'll be the people actually like actioning that. 'Cause, yeah,
I actually, at some point, maybe we follow up and have a longer conversation about this, because we are experimenting with some of our customers with a new role that we're calling the sales ambassador. And it's like, you think about this. We talked about this at length on this call, right, on this podcast, and understanding the relationships and how to leverage them is a sophisticated thing. Like you have to, you have to. You're thinking about all these, like, if you're going to leverage a chairman of AT&T, and he's got a relationship with this target CEO, and you need to understand a lot of nuance there. How does the chairman of AT&T feel about reaching out to this person specifically? How do they like to do it? Is it going to debit $10,000 from their relationship credit bank, or is there a way to make it so that he actually is, paying in $10,000? It's a credit, and like if you got floor seats at the Warriors game, maybe that's a credit, and that's something you guys can do, there's certainly enough money on the line, if you're managing these big accounts, to go do that. But understanding all that, and understanding, like, where to invest, and how to ask, and how to make the ask the right way, I think that's beyond a lot of people. I would say, maybe it's like beyond most people. It's beyond most people in the world. Like, you have to learn how to do that, and you do over time. Like, if you go through the sales path and you start out as an SDR, and then you become an AE, and then you become like a senior strategic AE. At some point along that curve, you have developed that skill. You know how to make those asks, because that's how you got there, right? Like that's how you got to be like a senior AE. But it's not something that everybody's got, and it's not something I think that, like, an SDR who is coming out of college, fresh, and this is one of their early jobs. I don't think they know how to do. They don't know how to do this. It's dangerous to put them in that position. But I think it can be learned for sure. And so we've been, experimenting with the sales ambassador role, which is you learn the specific skill set of these more senior, like account executives, but the very specific thing, which is, how do we leverage these relationships? How do we map out these relationships, understand them, make the appropriate asks? Nobody wants to have the SDR be the person who says, "Hey, chairman of AT&T, could you introduce me, the SDR, to the CEO?" Like, that's nonsense, right? What the sales ambassador is doing is they need to learn to be a puppet master behind the scenes, understanding all the relationships that can and should be leveraged, but they're like basically invisible, right? Nobody even necessarily needs to know that they exist. They're just the ones pulling the strings and getting the right information to the chairman of AT&T, so that he can send the right message to the target CEO, so that the target CEO and your CEO can have an initial meeting, probably with the account executive present on that call, so that the account executive can then take the follow-up actions that come out of the call between the two CEOs. And then that's how the CEO gets engaged. But guess what? the sales ambassador or the, like if it was the SDR, doesn't even exist. They orchestrated the whole thing like the magician behind the scenes, but nobody even knows that they exist and they don't have to. And part of the challenge of this is you have to re-architect, like how does that role get compensated? Like how do you, like what is the, because it's not, this person's not going to set meetings for themselves, right? And like the things that they're doing are invisible essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you give them you would give them either a net new pipeline, if that's what it is, or you give them like the revenue that they touched number, basically. If they had something to do with getting them more connected. But I love that role. I think that's an incredible role, and what a great learning opportunity. That will be the future sales leader of your organization, I bet, if they can learn that at such an early age. The only other nuance that we didn't talk about, and fuck, I could riff about this all day, and I'll wrap this up soon with 2 final questions. But the other thing that takes a decent amount of business acumen to understand is timing, and there is a patience element to this too. I remember back in the day, we were trying to sell to a very large tech company in the e-commerce space. Everyone knows them, and we'd had like 3 opportunities go to the like 1 yard line, and there was this product feature or product uh feature that they just couldn't get beyond. And over time I had built a really good relationship, and we had a few different dots of connectivity to like big time power over there. Like we were going way over our champions' heads that were like running this. And there was 2 different times where I was asked to leverage these, and we're like, is that thing fixed yet? Because if that thing's not fixed and we use this, we're only going to have 1 shot at this relationship. They're going to give us the time of day, and we haven't fixed the thing. So it is not time yet. Let's wait 9 months, figure that out. Because that's the other thing people don't understand about relationships is like, sometimes you only get 1 shot to leverage it, and then you're like, hey, I shot that down to my team. Like, you told me what's up. I did that. I'm not going to do that again in 6 months' time. So that's the other nuance that I think is important to understand if you're running this kind of playbook.
yeah.
Yeah.
All I can say is I agree.
Yeah. we're on the same page. All right, man. So final 2 questions. And I keep these intentionally vague, but the first one is, what is one thing that revenue leaders believe today that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
That you should do cold outreach.
Hot take. So scrap it all. Any, and that's pure cold, pure cold. You can still do outbound, but no pure cold.
Outbound
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, you got to do outbound, but cold, I think it just tarnishes your brand. Like every time I get an email from, it's not, I get an email from somebody that I don't know and they're selling something I got one from, I got a cold email from NetSuite. I mean, the people at NetSuite have got to know me. There are people over there that know me. I got a cold email. Why did you cold email me? It just makes me like, the poor AE is doing his or her job, but I'm like, you can get to me. It's not that hard from somebody that knows me. And why are you coming in cold? So it like, I think it like erodes your brand. And I think it doesn't get you a lot. The probability you're actually going to get a deal out of that is just not that high. And the other thing is there are ways that you can go in warm now, and you should invest in those things. Like just stop doing the cold stuff. It's nobody wants another piece of spam in their inbox.
It's a hot take, but I like it. And I think that's a great example, right? That NetSuite example. Like you get those emails, you're like, I know 7 people over there. If they want to talk to me, like find it,
Yeah, I'll
find
pick
them.
up the phone and they can call
Yeah.
me. Like my phone will ring. I
Yeah.
know them, and like, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question is, what is one actionable tactic or strategy that revenue leaders can implement today that you think will move the needle above and beyond kind of this playbook we talked about and, leveraging those warm introductions?
I mean, this is the point where I get completely self-serving. Go to ctd.ai and set up your own Connect the Dots account. I mean,
There you go.
that's the play.
There you go. Done. That's the move. So if you resonated with everything we talked about during this discussion. It has helped my career, maybe made my career. Sounds like it helped and made your career as well. And now there's tech that can help us. Cool, man. And if people want to follow along with what you're doing, reach out on LinkedIn, follow you on LinkedIn. You're a Twitter guy. What's the best way to keep in touch?
I keep thinking someday I'll be a Twitter guy, and that day is not quite here yet. In the meantime, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Drew Sechrist, Sechrist. You can send me an email. I like email. If if it's
Just
thoughtful.
find your entry point. Find the
Yeah.
right entry point.
Drew at ctd.ai. That's and then those are the ways to get me.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, Drew, appreciate you, man. You've had such an incredible career. I can't believe you're number 36 at Salesforce. That's wild. Thanks for sharing some of your wisdom today. It was really fun riffing with you. And for all those listeners, thanks for hanging out. I always say listening is one thing, executing is everything. Actually apply some of these lessons, get those warm intros rocking. And we'll see you next week.